beautiful people, welcome back to the channel. Pots and Petals here, everything garden and allotment related. Today's video is going to be about the Polyhouse. I'm going to run through some of the materials that I've used, the pros and the cons to the Polyhouse, and also any tweaks that I would make if I was to rebuild it again. The Polyhouse is this structure just over here, so we'll pop over there in a minute. It's an absolute scorcher of a day today, so I found myself just under the shade of the elder tree for a little bit. It's meant to get to 26, 27, so same as yesterday, a bit too warm to be doing anything too taxing. So we're going to take another chilled one today, not go silly in the sun, and just enjoy it. Let's pop over to the Polyhouse and I'll just give you the polytunnel update. So this is my Polyhouse, which I built myself 2 years ago? No, last spring. So it's its second summer. It's a wooden structure and it is 3 meters long by 2 meters wide and then 2 meters in height, dropping down to 1.8 meters. It's made up of 2x2 and 4x4 posts. I'll take you inside in a little while and I'll show you how the actual structure is built. And then the outside is covered in a polythene polytunnel fabric. It is sun protecting, so it doesn't cause extra glare. I'll pop a link. This isn't a sponsored video, but I will let you know what materials I did use. But let's go inside. I don't know how long I'll be able to stay inside. It's quite warm in there. I don't know if the camera is picking that up, but it's 47.3 degrees in here. So we'll film what we can, but it might get a little warm. So we've got 4x4 posts in each of the corners. So this is just one side. So we've got one 4x4 there and another 4x4 there. You could cement these in, but we chose to use these stakes, which are about a foot and a half long stakes that go into the ground, which you sledgehammer in, and then there's a bracket on top which your 4x4 slides into. Now these are £15 each, so it's a little bit more expensive than a bag of cement, but it was a lot quicker than waiting for the cement to set. Once we'd got the 4x4s in, we were then able to start building a wall at a time. So we started with this side, and it was a point of creating this square here, and then each square we made, we then popped it up against the 4x4s, and we were able to start putting in the brackets to secure each panel one at a time. So that's a 4x4 corner, and you can see we've just used some brackets here to attach the panels as we've gone. So we've got some brackets up there, but then as we move down, we've also got a bracket in there. And then further down, right at the bottom, you'll have to excuse the weeds, but we bracketed down there as well. There is wood that comes all the way along. You can't see that now because of the plastic, but we did make whole panels one at a time. And then we've just got the middle brackets just to add that little bit more sturdiness. It wasn't needed. And then on top we've just got the roof brackets, and along with some wider ones because the water was sitting on top of the roof a little bit too much, but we'll go into that detail a little bit later. So yeah, brackets and screws just to attach these, and it is just a point of working round one at a time. We added a window in of the 2x2, a bit of a bodge job, but it does what we need it to. And again, we've just done the same along this side, so you can see all the brackets that we used just to make sure it's nice and sturdy. The whole point of the Polyhouse was that I wanted it to last quite a few years, so we wanted to make sure that it'd be able to withstand the wind and some of the British weather that we get. And along the paths we've got old scaffolding boards, so I dug these in probably about 6 inches, so they're in there nice and strong. Then we've just bark chipped the floor to keep the weeds down. It does stay quite dry in here, and I do find if I keep my seedlings on the dry bark, there's less chance of them being eaten by slugs than when they're actually in the compost here. And then around the outside, just so that we could contain the soil, we just added some plastic which I had dotted around the plot. So rather than send it to landfill, we found a use for some of the plastic. I believe it's old conservatory, like is it PVC? It's quite strong plastic. I've used it as fencing around a lot of my plot. When I took over my second one, there's quite a lot of it left. So yeah, that just contains the soil from the outside, because we don't want that to rot away that bottom piece of wood that we've got running along there. So I've just drilled this plastic into the side, and that just contains that soil. So once the actual structure was up, we were then able to start stapling on the plastic membrane. So we just used a standard staple gun and stapler and went round and just tacked it all onto the wooden structure. The actual plastic, getting that on was a little bit of a faff, but if you're any good at wrapping birthday, Christmas presents, it's not too bad. So as you can see, we just had to fold it in and staple it over just to get that nice and tight. Now the magpies do like coming and pecking at the silver staples, so maybe go for something other than silver, because they do like to sit here. And as you can see, they've already started to pop a hole. And then around the sides, the corners of the wood, we did pop in some foam just to stop that rubbing and cutting through the fabric. So we went all the way around all the corners with the special foam. I would have got something a little bit thicker, but it did do the job. So yeah, we stapled all of that around and folded it around like one giant parcel. Brought you down to the wild side because I haven't stoned this area. So when you're putting the fabric over the top, you want to make sure that you've got a nice lip underneath, so it stops any draft coming through, and so you're keeping the inside as airtight as possible to keep that heat in. So on the other side I have added some stones, but I just wanted to bring you around here just to show you want enough material so that you create a lip. And then I've just used bricks to keep it down. Haven't had a problem, and this side seems to be absolutely fine. And then just to add a bit of colour, I've just done some pots along here with some bedding plants and some herbs. We've added some stones along the back and along the sides just to keep that lip down, but I just wanted to add a little bit more colour. And this is the side which is the tallest, so the water should be running that way, so this won't get an absolute cascade of water at any point. So I do have to keep these nicely watered, but it just adds a little bit of colour down the side and gives the place that little bit of character. So we've got the rosemaries, we've got some oregano, and then the bedding plants. We've got the pelargoniums or geraniums, the French marigolds. That's a thyme, but they should all start blooming We've got quite a few out already, but hopefully they'll fill up a bit of this space. Go through some of the pros of having a polyhouse at the allotment. I'd say number one is that you're able to start crops much earlier in the year, so it provides a much warmer environment earlier for you. So this will allow you to sow salad throughout the year perhaps to stop the frosts, but it also allows you to get tomatoes, cucumbers and some of those warmer loving plants into the ground much sooner. Be able to plant these plants out in the polyhouse probably a month earlier than what you would be able to out on the main plot, out on the ground. Another plus of the polyhouse is the protection that it gives from the wind, the excessive rain that we do get here in the UK, but also some of the scorching sunlight that we've started to get. The polythene that I've used is a special polyhouse plastic which does have the added benefit of sun protection, so it lets the right amount of sunlight through for the plants to really thrive, not only from the elements, but it also does stop some birds and animals from attacking your crops. And even with the tomatoes, you might find that there's some blight resistant. It might not stop the blight completely, but if your outdoor tomatoes have got them, it normally gives you 2 or 3 weeks at least before your polyhouse tomatoes start to show signs. So it gives you that little fire break, and it also allows you to just keep a check on your polyhouse tomatoes that little bit more carefully if anything was to happen with your outdoor. Another great thing about the polyhouse is that they don't have to be this size. So any size garden that you've got, you would be able to make something similar to this to suit your garden's needs. So you could half this easily, you could even quarter it. And by making the project that little bit smaller, you're also going to be cutting down on the price. So don't think that your polyhouse has got to be this big. It could also be smaller, and if you've got bigger ideas, you could double this easily. And if we're comparing this to a polytunnel, the polyhouse is much more sturdier. I had a polytunnel here for 2 years, and the structure was just so flimsy after all the wind that we get down here. So I just found that the wooden structure is a lot more sturdier, especially with the high wind. So if you're looking for something that's going to last that little bit longer, I would look at building your own wooden structure, as you can make it any size that you want, and as I say, that then fits your garden needs. As always, there's always some negatives. So one of the main issues with a polyhouse or any polytunnel structure is that you don't get any rain hitting the soil inside, so you do have to be more on top of your watering if you have got a polyhouse or a polytunnel. Now there are a few things that you could do to improve that. So you could make sure that you've got really good soil structure by adding on lots of compost every year, but also using Allotments, which are a terracotta pot which you sit into the ground and you fill with water, and you'll find that your plant's roots will slowly grow towards the Allotment, and the terracotta pot allows the moisture to just slowly seep out and allows the tomato plants to pull what water it actually needs. So you could have a few of those dotted in amongst your plants and keeping those topped up, but you also could have a drip system, so just having a hose pipe attached to some form of water butt. You just pinch some holes into your hose pipe and you run that all through the soil in your polyhouse, and you just allow the water just to drip feed constantly through. So that just allows the soil to stay moist under the dry conditions of the polyhouse. Like I said earlier, it is really hot in here, 47.3. Your tomatoes and cucumbers ideally want 15 to 32 degrees Celsius, so it is a little too warm. So I do find these polyhouse structures can get quite hot. But to overcome that, you can add some shade netting just on over the top, or you can buy a whitewash. Plastic that I do have does have sun protection, but sometimes you do just need to add that little bit more shade protection. So shade netting, or just some of the whitewash that you get for your greenhouse. One other thing is that it was quite expensive, but that's purely because of the wood that was needed to build it. Wood just seems to have really gone up in price. But you would be able to get around this if you went out and tried to find your own reclaimed wood. You could even try some pallet wood. I have seen some people on the plot make some great sheds and polyhouse structures with pallets, so that would be a great try. And the other thing you can do is reduce the size. So by reducing the size, you're actually reducing the material that's needed. So that's a good idea. They haven't always got to be this big. What I wouldn't hold back on is the fabric that you use to cover the polyhouse. That's the main part of the structure. So I would really think about spending a little bit of money to make sure that the material that you use is fit for purpose. There's a couple of websites out there. If you just type in polytunnel material cover, something along those lines, and it should bring up some reputable suppliers that you can use. So don't hold back with the expense with the plastic covering. So what would I do differently? I've already hit on one of the topics, which is I would change the staples that I've put in at the top just to stop the magpies from coming down and pecking at them all the time, causing holes. So I'd probably use something black or copper. And I'd also use a thicker foam all around the edges, which we went all the way around where the plastic might rub on the wood. So it's done a good job. I just would have done it a little bit thicker, because there are some areas where it has started to rub through. So whilst we're on this side of the polyhouse, one thing I would do is change the slope of the roof on the polyhouse. It's not slopey enough, so the water doesn't actually run off as well as what I would have liked. So that is why we had to put more braces in the roof and had to put some thicker boards in there, because the water was just starting to sit on top. So I do have to come down sometimes and just push up on the roof like that, and it does cascade down eventually. It hasn't come through. It does cause some big puddles on top. So that is probably the biggest thing I would change. So when you do construct something like this, just make sure that you add a decent slope to your roof to allow that water to drain off. And if we had have done that properly, I would have been able to have added guttering down this side and collected some of the water off it. There's no point really putting guttering on it at the moment, because there's just not enough of a degree for the water to run off into the guttering. But that's something that I won't be able to fix easily. So before the polyhouse was built, I did have a polytunnel in this space, but I didn't have any beds. Everything was grown in pots, and it was mainly used to grow seedlings. So a lot of this area was used to walk on, and that did compact the ground underneath. I did try to dig and disturb some of that ground to aerate it, but I probably didn't put enough effort into it. So under here it is very compact, and all on top is just compost. So I wish I'd spent more time actually preparing the ground in here, but it's just something that I'm going to have to start doing over the years now, and just keep improving the soil structure. The problem with the compacted ground underneath is that as the plants try to push their roots down into the soil to gain some of that water that's further down, they're going to find it a lot more difficult in that compacted soil than they are the compost above. So it does just mean that you've got to be down here watering a lot more. Unfortunately, the compost that I have used does dry out quite quickly down here. So over time, I'm just going to start using my homemade compost. I'll start adding in more manure where I can over the year, and that should over time build up a better structure which will hold on to that moisture, which is what you really need inside a polyhouse, just due to the heat that you get. One improvement that I do need to make this year, just for over the winter time, is to add a door onto the front here. I'm not too worried about it at the moment because that needs as much air as possible in there at the moment, but that's something that we'll start looking at doing in the autumn time, ready for winter, so that we can get some salad crops in there over the winter period. We'll just be using the same polythene. I've got some spare, and we'll be using some Velcro around the door just to secure that down, and we'll probably use a staple gun just to secure that. But when I do come to adding the door, I'll bring you with me just so that you can see how we finish off that project. Overall, I'm really chuffed with the project. I think the polyhouse is worth it. I could have spent a little bit less overall. I could have used cement. I could have also used a little bit less wood, but overall it's definitely worth it. It's the right size for the 2 plots. It's done me well the first year, and it seems to be going really well this year. Other than the roof problem, which we seem to have fixed, I don't think there's much more that I would change, and I just need to make sure that I'm keeping up with topping up that soil. And if you notice, all of the cons to a polyhouse you can overcome in one way or another. So I think there's definitely some more improvements to come, especially when it comes to the watering aspect of the polyhouse. But I think it's a great project that all of you could give a go, no matter what size your garden. If you do decide to give a polyhouse project a go, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories and what designs you're going for, whether it's something a bit bigger or something a bit smaller. I'd love to hear. So I've just come over to the pond just to come and see what's going on. The water is so much clearer after getting the weed out yesterday. I can see so much more going on in there. I haven't seen any newts or frogs just yet. I do find that they tend to come out when the sun's hitting the pond. They just seem to sunbathe. So I've been keeping an eye out, because in a few more minutes this will be back in the shade. But I just thought I'd take 5-10 minutes and chill out by the pond and take it in. So as you can see, the tomatoes are doing really well in this heat. I know it's a little bit too warm for them, but I'd rather that than too cold. And same with the cucumbers at the back here. They've really put on quite a bit of growth over the last couple of weeks as it's warmed up. But it's these poor souls that need to go out in the ground. So I think it's warm enough. So we need to dot these around and find them some homes. So I've just planted them out. Got a little cucumber just down in this corner, And then amongst the squash we've got a tomato over in that corner, and we've got another tomato out here. I haven't planted any more in here. They're my squash and my climbing beans. And then just down here I've popped in another cucumber and 2 tomatoes there. 2 tomatoes in those corners, and then we've got 2 more down here with another cucumber. It does seem quite tightly packed, but I'm just going to see how they go, and hopefully I shouldn't get too much mildew this year. Just giving them a real nice watering in, and hopefully they'll soon start to take off. So I don't want to give too much away because I am going to do my June plot tour in the next couple of days, but I did want to just show off the Nigella, or Love in a Mist. Mostly blue, but we've got a few white and a few mixed colour in there. Just absolutely beautiful. All the fronzy, feathery leaves mixed with that blue and white jewel-like petal structure. So it's been another scorcher of a day today. I hope you found the Polyhouse video of some interest, and it's given you some ideas or inspiration to build your own polyhouse. It was probably a little bit too warm today to film the Polyhouse video, but I know you guys were interested, so I wanted to get it out to you. I haven't done much more down the plot today. I'm going to finish up with some watering just before I leave, and then we're going to call it a day, and I'm going to head off home. I hope you've had a lovely weekend wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to seeing you again down on the plot. So take care guys, I'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.